Hello, Minnesota, and welcome back. This is the Tony Hernandez Show. I'm your host, Tony Hernandez, and we broadcast live every Saturday from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock on SCC Television Studios in White Bear Lake, and we also replay on SPNN. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our loyal audience out there. We have a great show today. In a little bit, I'm going to bring on Mr. James Carson, who is the chairman of the 4th Congressional District Republicans. We're going to be talking about a very important date that's coming up on Tuesday, February 4th. It's the Minnesota precinct caucuses, and we're encouraging everyone to get out there and get involved, whether you're going to get involved with the Republicans or the Democrats or the Independence Party. This is your opportunity to get involved. I posted on Facebook the other day how so many people like to complain about big government politics, or they complain about Obamacare, or they complain about our elected politicians, and very few people actually get out there and do something. So Jim Carson's going to be telling us about how to get out there, become active, so that you can make a difference in your local situation. After that, we're going to be bringing on the Minnesota State Auditor candidate. His name is Randy Gilbert. He's a great guy. He's going to be telling us about what he would do if he was elected to become the next state auditor, and he's going to tell us what does a state auditor do. I don't think a lot of people necessarily know. And we're just going to get to know Randy Gilbert and talk about some of the issues. After that, we're going to bring on a law student. His name is Michael Blissenbach, and him and I are going to be discussing the Catholic vote here in the Twin Cities. We're also going to talk about an important Supreme Court case that's coming up, Sebellius versus Hobby Lobby, which is going to decide the issue of the contraception mandates and the issue of religious liberty that's involved with the Affordable Care Act. So he's going to be sharing with us some great information about that, and then also just how Catholics vote in the Twin Cities. And with that, I'm going to bring on our first guest, Mr. James Carson. He's the chairman of the 4th Congressional Republicans.
Good to see you again, Tony.
Jim, thanks for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you were pretty busy. Can you just tell, where were you before this?
Well, there was a debate at Concordia High School down in Roseville.
A debate today. For who?
The gubernatorial debate. We had 5 of the 6 Republican governor candidates, and it was a great exchange. It went for several hours. And they got into some in-depth issues and got a chance to really get to know these guys. What
were some of the major issues that were talked about, if you could briefly tell us?
Education, human services came up quite a bit. It was and the differences in their approaches to these things, economic growth and development, and the economy in general, and of course healthcare. That's a big issue on everybody's minds these days with the catastrophe that we call Obamacare and MNsure.
5 out of the 6 candidates were there. In your opinion, is Governor Mark Dayton vulnerable in 2014?
Oh, absolutely. Governor Dayton's got a serious problem. He's his numbers are falling and they're weak. I think that he's odds on to lose.
Yeah, with the Metrodome deflating today, and the dome is no longer there, and all the legal holdup with the stadium. Do you think the Vikings stadium is going to be an issue, and do you think it's going to hurt or help Dayton?
No, I don't think the stadium is going to be a big deal. It's going to be, it'll be there, but people are more concerned with economics and with healthcare and differences in education. The Vikings thing is going to be significant, but it's not going to be a central point.
I see.
In the campaign.
I brought you on to talk a little more about the Minnesota State caucuses. They're being held on Tuesday, February 4th.
Yep.
And you can actually go and find your precinct location. Dallas, if you can pop up the screen, this website here. It's if you put in caucus, MNSOS, this will pop up.
Right.
And you just hit in your zip code. Here we're in 55110, and you hit go, and then it brings you, to ask for your house number, and you pop in your address, and you hit go. And
actually, I live in 55110, and I actually live in the next precinct, kind of over. Precinct caucuses are a critical date on the calendar, political calendar. It's the day when the parties get together on their own sides, and they essentially are reborn. Everything starts from precinct caucuses. It's my favorite day of the year, other than Election Day itself. And I will be a precinct convener in the precinct that's just a little bit south of here.
I think one of the things that keeps a lot of people from participating in their local politics is they think that they have to be a dyed-in-the-wool DFLer or Republican or whatnot. Like, do you have to have political experience to go out there and caucus on Tuesday, February 4th?
No, we get newcomers all the time. It's the place for where newcomers can to get started involved in politics. It's where I got involved in my community in 2000 when I moved out to White Bear Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to precinct caucuses as a Democrat back in the 70s. It was back 74, 76, and 78.
Mm-hmm.
I went to 3 separate caucuses in the northwest suburbs. But it's an important part of what we do in politics it's the step towards getting the candidates. The people who go to caucuses and are many of them, and if you want to be a delegate, you pretty much can be in the Republican Party. You're elected then to your local party delegate convention and they select and endorse the candidates for legislature. And then if you go to the state convention, you get to vote for the candidates who will become governor. And U.S. senator and other constitutional officers.
So you go to the caucus to become a delegate, then, right, where you can vote to endorse your local state house.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's the most important thing is we select delegates for the local party, and then we also work on resolutions. If you want to change the Republican Party platform or the DFL party platform, you go to caucuses, you introduce a resolution to change it, and then it goes up through a process of consolidation and winnowing those down into proposals that are then considered at the local party and then at the congressional district party and the state party.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you can have a lot of influence then if you become a delegate.
If you want to have an influence on politics other than just the ballot, get involved in your party, mm-hmm, Republican or Democrat. It really is important to be involved. Mm-hmm. And I of course want people to become involved in the Republican Party, but if you're not a conservative, it's probably not much point. But we also have a lot of moderates in the Republican Party as well, and they are welcome, despite what you might see in the press. We do welcome moderates. We're especially concerned about fiscal issues this year, and I think that's what you're going to see is that our focus is on issues related to money and spending and taxes and economic development. Those mm-hmm. are then how we spend the money on education, human services, and things like that. We want the most for our money that we can get. Yeah,
and we should also mention that the Independence Party also holds their caucus on the same day. They're considered a major party.
Yes, they're a major party.
They don't determine that by how? Is it the previous major election?
Yeah, it's a certain number of votes you get if you reach a certain level. They don't do theirs, though, by precinct. They do it some other way, and I don't quite understand the process on the Independence Party. The Democrats and Republicans, though, do it the same way. We both in our local area here, in where you would be talking, we meet typically at a local high school, and then we break down into classrooms. Okay. So mine will be at White Bear South.
Yeah, and then, I just wanted to talk briefly as well. You're the chairman of the 4th Congressional Republicans.
Right.
I've noticed that since you've taken leadership, a lot of the major conflicts that were involved have seemed to really calm down, and I've been witnessing that people are actually starting to unify. And
thank you.
Our 4th Congressional Republicans, are they ready to hit the ground and help out their state house candidates and the other candidates that are going to be running?
Absolutely. We have an important congressional race coming up. Now, the odds are long on us winning the congressional race. As you well know, it's very tough going, but it's not impossible. With a good year and a great candidate and a bit of luck, we can win that. We can win in Congress. But more important and more doable in 2014 is we have legislative races that are critically important. We have 4 Republican seats in the legislature inside the 4th, or at least that include the 4th. And one of those is now open with Andrea Kiefer retiring. So we'll have that open seat to worry about. And I believe there are 3 other legislative seats that we can win in 2014 with the right candidates, the right campaigns, enough money, enough resources, and so on. And we will do everything we can to bring our message to the doorstep into the mailboxes of the voters in those districts especially, and make sure that our candidate has an opportunity to win and that the public has a real chance to see him. Now, in the end, it's people will vote for who they want to vote mm-hmm. for. Mm-hmm. We can't make them vote for anybody, but we can tell them all about our candidates and put them in a positive light.
Yeah, and one thing that we've mentioned on this show before is that if you want to run for a state house seat, these state house districts aren't that big. What is there, something like 17,000, 18,000 homes or
households.
units.
We call them I call them doors.
Doors.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So if you think about it, we're still at a point. If somebody declared now and they wanted to win, they could get out there.
Yes.
And the main strategy is really to go out there and knock on doors, introduce yourself to people. And really take a database of the doors you're knocking on and the response that you got.
I am a firm believer that politics is a fuller brush kind of endeavor. You have to talk to people on their doorstep, in their front yard, in their driveway, and about the issues of the day and what's on their minds. Mm-hmm. And it's more important actually to listen than it is to talk. But but still, you need to let them know what your positions are on those issues that are important to the voter. And that's not money; that's shoe leather. Yeah. It's vitally important that every candidate do what they can to talk to every voter out there that's reachable.
I feel like if somebody wanted to really go out there and really wanted to represent the people in their House district, I feel like if they door knocked their district 2 to 3 times and had $10,000 or less to spend on signs and to get their name out there.
You need more than 10,000.
How much? What do you think the minimum would be?
25, and I think the limits now on the House are 60, but you don't need to spend the limit. But I think 25 is a good campaign.
25?
Yeah.
And is that difficult?
In a suburban race.
Is that difficult to raise if you're an endorsed state House candidate?
Sure, it's not easy to raise, but with the return of the political contribution refund program, it's much easier. And if you've got a viable race, 25,000 shouldn't be that hard to do. And we'd like to see more. Mm-hmm. If I think that in the district that's just to the south of here, where my district 43A, we'll spend north of 40. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you that. Mm-hmm. And then any of the other districts that are around will spend 25 to 60,000. Mm-hmm. Now the district that we have that's the best district in the 4th congressional district where we do not have a candidate that stepped forward is 42A, and that's a district that includes Shoreview, north of County Road F, all of Arden Hills, and all of Mounds View.
And that was that where April King ran in that district for the state senate?
Yeah, it's the northern half of the district. Yeah, she was like 2 points down in that district in a bad year. In a good year, we'll win that district, and I'm looking forward. That's one of my primary targeted districts.
Can you talk about that district again, just quickly, the geography? If
Shoreview north of F, and then all of Arden Hills and all of Mounds View.
Sounds good, Jim. And then do you guys have a website where people can contact the organization?
cd4-mngop.com.
James Carson, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
And wish you the best in 2014.
Good to see you again.
Likewise,
Take
likewise. Care. So we're going to bring in Sam Wayne Pierce quickly to talk about what we're going to be hitting on for the end of the show. And Sam Pierce, can you hear us right now? We were having some technical difficulties before. Hello, Sam. Sam? Oh, I don't think we can get a hold of Sam right now for some reason or another. Sorry about that, Sam. And with that, though, we are going to bring on our next candidate. We're really honored to have this gentleman here. His name is Randy Gilbert, and he is running for the Minnesota State Auditor. And Randy actually ran for the Republican endorsement in 2010. He didn't earn it that year, but here he is again running for a second time. And, to me, that just shows an incredible amount of character and commitment, and it really demonstrates how much he wants to represent the people in this position. So with that, I'll bring on Mr. Randy Gilbert.
Hey, thank you, Tony.
Randy, great to have you here.
It's a nice intro. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Can you talk about a little more of that, though? I mean, you ran in 2010, and you came close to getting the endorsement that year, but you came up a little short.
Yep.
And here you are running again, and am I right? That must mean you really want this position.
Yeah, it was one of those deals that certainly I wanted it 4 years ago, and Patty Anderson ultimately got the endorsement, and I got behind her right away after she got that endorsement. I believed Patty was going to win, and when Patty didn't win, unfortunately by such a narrow margin, it wasn't more than a few months that I could feel that fire still burning, and we decided right away there's no reason to tap dance around this, because you see a lot of people asking, you're going to run, you're not going to run. That fire was still burning hot. I still see that the position is a very important position and needs to have a lot of work performed in it. And I decided, we're going to gear back up and just keep going and keep that momentum that we had from 2010 rolling into 2014.
And, I noticed in the 2010 elections that the state auditor and then the state attorney general candidate, they kind of run in it seemed like they were running in hindsight to the governor's candidate at the
Right.
time, Tom Emmer. How will you really distinguish yourself, amongst the three statewide candidates that are running? How are you going to really distinguish yourself and get your name out there?
Right, that's the $64,000 question. Especially in a year when you have a U.S. Senate candidate and a gubernatorial candidate, they suck all the oxygen out of the room. So as you start getting down to the other constitutional offices, it's hard to get that attention. But there's some big issues happening in Minnesota, and it's one of the things that I'm going to be using for my campaign to talk about. And I've been already. One of them and I'll just we're going to talk about
Yep.
is the state's unfunded public pension liability. It is a huge issue, and it's a huge issue from multiple views. This number is $16 billion as of last January, not this January. I expect it to be a little bit more this January.
So can you explain what that $16 billion is?
Yep, the $16 billion is an amount that we owe to the public unions that we don't have. So if everyone retired today and we had to pay people out, we don't have the money to pay them right now. And it concerns me, Tony, for a couple of reasons. It concerns me that there are some hard-working men and women that believe they're supposed to get a pension that we don't have for them available. We don't have available for them right now. And I'm concerned that they may not have pensions available. I'm also concerned for the people, the other 80% of the public out there that may have to pay for this, that aren't even aware about the fact that their taxes could be going up if that's the only way we want to handle this, to pay for these pensions. So it's a huge issue, and not just here in Minnesota. This is a huge issue across the nation. You think about Detroit. Detroit just declared bankruptcy some months ago because of the unfunded public pension liability that they owed to the unions. And that problem is a true problem here in Minnesota as well, and we need to address it. That's one of the ways that I hope to get a little bit more traction on the state auditor's office.
So essentially, there's a $16 billion deficit in the unfunded portion of the pension. Is that a good way?
In the pension fund, yes.
In the
That
pension
is the
fund.
portion that we owe that we currently do not have in our coffers.
And can you give me a couple examples of who these workers are that will be affected in the future?
Yeah,
if this problem isn't solved.
Yeah.
Are they teachers?
These are our neighbors, our friends, our parents, our brothers, our sisters, teacher unions, the public work unions, the police and fire unions that are out there. Anybody that has, that's a union worker that works for the state or a state-affiliated organization is the people that are affected by this. Now, there's multiple funds, so I do need to state there are some funds that are doing better than others. This is an aggregate total. All unions put together, this is where they sit. But it affects everybody.
So would it affect people that are not only working right now for the retirement, but would it affect retirees?
Yes, it
getting
affects
their
those
benefits
that
right
are
now?
retired, those that are going to be retired, soon to be retired, and those that will not be retired in years. Now, the people that are not going to be retired for some years, they're not thinking about that right now, but they should be. Because what's happening today affects them in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years when they retire.
So what happened to the pensioners in Detroit or in Michigan? How were they affected?
Well, that's in bankruptcy court right now, so it's still yet to be determined.
Okay.
So, but I'm sure they're watching every day what happens, how are they going to get paid, what's going to happen to their funds. But I'm sure they're concerned that it's going to be, days gone by when General Motors and such bankrupt and suddenly there was just no pension funds. So it's a big issue. Another thing that I'm going to be using to talk about more, and I always hesitate to get this information out there too soon because the current state auditor is probably watching. But this is more of a metro issue. But the Met Council was the bane of my existence, one of the banes of my existence when I was mayor out in Long Lake. And there's these unfunded public pension, or these unfunded mandates that get pushed to cities. The light rail that we hear talking about right now that, fortunately for many of us, the governor did not put into his bonding plan this time, but these are issues that the Met Council deals with, and the Met Council is under the state auditor's purview. It is an organization that needs to have more transparency, needs to be talked about more, and we don't hear that much about it except for the programs that they want to put in. I know that people need to hear more about how the money's being spent and what they told you initially and how it's actually coming to fruition. And that's one of the deals that I plan on bringing forward as we get closer to election time, to have people really start understanding how their money's being spent.
Nice. Well, I'm on your website right now, gilbertforauditor.com. Dallas, if you could just pop that up so people can see. And we'd encourage everybody to go to gilbertforauditor.com to learn more about Randy's candidacy for the state auditor. Looks like you have some pretty good sections here. Can you just tell us a little more, Randy, about your family, your background, where you live, and your profession?
Sure. I have a daughter. She's 22. She's a senior up at UND right now.
Nice.
And senior, I can't believe that. My
Yeah.
little girl is a senior. So she's on her victory lap.
Time flies, huh?
Yeah, as we were talking before the show, you're on the front side of that cycle right now. And I'm, in the middle of it. But it seemed like yesterday my little girl was in my arms and I was reading stories, or we were teaching her how to skate or ride her bike. And here she's a senior in college and soon will be one of the working class. And get a little nervous for her, about what her future holds. But she is the light of my life. I can't imagine my life without her. She's a gift that just keeps on giving, and I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world because of my daughter.
So is she going to be helping you with the campaign up there north in Duluth?
Well, she's in Fargo.
Oh, in Fargo.
Grand Forks.
Got it.
So, I do hope caucus time I can get her to cross the river and, get involved in the Moorhead area up there and speaking on my behalf.
She's still voting here in Minnesota then?
Yes.
Oh, that's good.
Yep. So, that's my daughter, and again, wonderful part of it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things that I think is really important for people to think about, the state auditor is a very important position. When we get going into the election cycles, and we'll be talking about U.S. Senate, we'll be talking about governorship, they'll talk about their local mayors and their local representatives. But the state auditor oversees $20 billion that's spent by 3,300 different taxing entities across the state of Minnesota.
Is that every 1 year or every 2 years?
It's that's every year, annually.
Okay.
And you sit and you think about that, $20 billion. It's not chump change.
No.
It's a lot of money. And this position doesn't get talked about. But yet, I guarantee tonight, many of your viewers will be in the house talking with their family, or they'll go out to dinner, or they'll be someplace, and the conversation of money will come up. Whether they got a good deal on something, or they need to buy a new car and they can't believe how expensive it is, or their insurance is going up. You name it, something will come up today, and they will talk about money, and they'll be passionate about it. The state auditor is watching out for their money because every local entity is taking their taxes and spending it, and that's what I oversee, will want to oversee. So it amazes me that we don't hear more about this position. Now, I think we don't hear a lot from our current state auditor, because our current state auditor is truly not an auditor. She's a biology major. And if you're going to be overseeing $20 billion of the taxpayers' money, and you're going to be primarily doing this by auditing, don't you think the state of Minnesota should have somebody that is an auditor, is an accountant? And that's what I'm bringing to the table, as you can see on the website.
Yeah, I'm looking on your website right now, gilbertforauditor.com, in the About section, and it says you have a Bachelor of Accounting.
I do.
University of Minnesota Duluth.
I did.
And you have an extensive background in auditing and tax field, working with various companies, and you've also been part of some entrepreneurial businesses. So you're saying then that the incumbent doesn't have a background like you do in accounting and finance, and
Right.
her background is in
Biology.
biology. And is that typical? I mean, are there people from a wide variety of backgrounds that end up being auditor, or why would you be more apt at this?
I think it's not atypical. We've had auditors in the past that have had more business experience and had better understanding of what is going on. But I think it's important. I know it's important. When I was mayor of Long Lake and I would try to get information from the state auditor's office, I was always appalled as an accountant, as a finance guy, as somebody who worked as a CFO, that the information that I wanted was not readily available. To me, that's exactly what an auditor does. We provide information in my private sector to the shareholders of the companies that we work for. Well, the taxpayers, the residents of Minnesota, are the shareholders of Minnesota. And if they want to get good, prompt information about their local city, their local county, their local school district, they should be able to go to the state auditor's office and get that information readily available to them. And it's not readily available to them. Now, a lot of people would argue that you don't need to be an auditor to be the state auditor. It's an elected position, but I would say it's a leadership position, and if you're going to lead accountants, if you're going to lead auditors, you better have a good understanding of what goes on. And that's how I'm different from the current state auditor. I do have the accounting experience, I do have the auditor experience, and I have the experience as a mayor, so I know both sides of the equation. And that's something that I think should be important, and I'm hoping that we can make that a very big campaign issue.
So Randy, can you tell us a little more about what the state auditor can do to control spending, and then also what can you do to uncover wasteful spending?
Sure. By audits, there's always ways to, that's what audits are meant to do, did the entities that were auditing do what they say they were going to do? Did they do it properly? So by the sheer force of auditing, you could go through and you could ask some questions. Why this year, looking at 3 or 4 year budgets and plans, did you spend more money in, your public works, for instance? It might be legitimate. The city councils probably went out and asked the people, hey, we want to spend more money because we need to buy 3 new trucks. All of our trucks are dying. Therefore, we need to spend $1 million. But if they didn't, and if they were just doing some other projects, the state auditor could ask those questions and should be asking those questions, because most people don't watch their state, their cities, their counties, the reports that closely, and the state auditor should be calling out these big differences. And it is something that I plan on doing, just asking the questions, letting the people know what's going on. So yes, the state auditor should be, we hear it said a lot of different ways, should be the taxpayer's watchdog. I like to look at it and say you should have somebody who's going to be your first line of defense, somebody that's shining the lights on the books, and that's what I want to do. I want to open up the books to all of Minnesota, shine lights on them and say, did you know that your city did this? If you knew and you're okay with it, I don't care, but I just want to make certain that you're aware of the fact that this is occurring. Did you know that Minneapolis is spending money on fountains? We hear that one quite a bit, so that's not a great one for me to pull out, but the state auditor has the right to ask these questions and should be asking these questions. She just isn't right now.
What about, I've heard a lot of different, rumors that I haven't actually done my fact checking on, and maybe you could shed some light on this. There's various accounts that all these different agencies have. People call them slush funds and whatnot. And it seems like when they need to, they can always find more money, or there may be some land that the state owns or some buildings that the state owns. Like, do these things ever disappear or lose the focus of the auditor in terms of, are there huge slush funds out there with taxpayer money that nobody knows about?
There's a lot of money out there that I don't think people are really aware of, that funds certain things. And the state auditor has purview over all of these things, and reports get put out. But if you don't know the report is there, if you're not talking about them, I'm not going to throw out one example right now because there are so many. But yes, there are a lot of these reports, and we should know about them. One that I will talk about is, we lease land, and the state leases land and has forestry land, and we lease the land out to, timber companies that harvest this. And that money goes to the school districts. Honestly, did anybody know that the money that we receive from harvesting land for trees was part of a school district fund? I don't think people did. How is that money being used? How is it being accounted for? I don't think anybody really knows. Now, it's not a huge number, but yet when you think about all the land that the state owns, and if they're doing this, people should have more understanding of it and how those funds are being used. And it is one of the things that I plan on putting together, and talking more about on a regular basis, because when people don't hear things, they just assume things are right. And that is one of my biggest concerns with our current state auditor. When is the last time you heard the state auditor really come forward and talk about anything? I have my ear to the ground and I hear nothing. Now, conversely, we have 2 auditors, and it's important for people not to forget this. We have the state auditor, who watches over 3,300 taxing entities. These are the local entities that's spending $20 billion. And then we have James Noble, who's the Office of Legislative Auditor. And he oversees everything that the legislatures do. He's the one right now who's starting to do the audit on MNsure. He's the one who just this week called out the fact that Governor Dayton used an airplane incorrectly and had a staff fly when he shouldn't have. Now, the governor said he was going to pay that back, and he thinks that's right. But the problem is you still did something that you weren't supposed to do. So here's the OLA bringing out issues on a regular basis. I hear him in the news every 2 weeks saying we need to audit this, we're not happy about this. Again, MNsure has been in the news everywhere, and he's doing this right now. The state auditor needs to be doing the same thing. These 2 offices, while they don't work in tandem, they should be working on many of the same things. And MNsure is one of the things that I do believe our current state auditor should be talking about. And I might have jumped ahead of it on your list here a little bit, but
no, I'm glad that you brought that up. And can you talk about, if you were elected state auditor, what you could do to potentially look into MNsure a little more to make sure that they're doing what they said that they were going to do?
It is under the jurisdiction of the OLA, James Noble, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for Mr. Noble. I think he's going to get in there and he's going to do a good report, and he's going to bring us back a report that is going to list out some issues. And he is not afraid to come back and list out issues. He is independent, which is something that you need to be when you are an auditor. You cannot worry about, is the Democratic governor is going to be upset with you, or the Republicans going to be upset with you. You are there to do a job, irregardless of who's in power. And I believe he's going to come back and give some great recommendations. Now the question is, will the recommendations be followed? That's where, we hope our legislatures will do their job. And that's frankly where I would do what Mr. Nobles does every now and again, because he looks at the Met Council and says the Met Council should have more oversight over them and have people doing more. As a state auditor, if Mr. Nobles puts together a report and he has these findings, and I note that in some time things aren't going to be done, I would ask those questions of the legislatures. It's not my purview, but I'm curious, why are you not following up on MNsure? And if I had a representative or a senator say, well, this isn't your purview, I'd say, au contraire, everything that plan is all about flows through the counties, flows through the cities, flows through the school districts. So if there are issues there, that means that the entities that I oversee are experiencing these issues. So I want to know, what are you doing about these issues to correct them so that the people of Minnesota are protected?
Yeah, that's great. And, going back to MNsure, so you said you trust Mr. Nobles, you believe that he's an independent type individual and with his leadership. So would it be your recommendation that the audits of MNsure, at least for now, would be internal and not through some type of independent agency?
I think yes. Let Jim get in there, Mr. Nobles get in there, and bring out the first findings, and there'll be many. There'll be many findings. He's already kind of indicated that, and then we can assess. And Mr. Nobles is professional enough that I think he would say, either we need to bring somebody else in because the issues are much larger than we are, or they're more, difficult than I think that my office can do. So let's see what his recommendations are. And at that point in time, if we believe he has not done a good job, then I think that's the time we could say, maybe we need to take this a step further. And it would be the House and the Senate, or even the governor, that would bring that up and say we should talk about it. And in a year of election, I don't think this topic is going away. I think this will be something that we'll hear much about from whether it's the Republican gubernatorial candidates or the House members running for seats. We'll hear many different ways that we should be improving this.
Yeah, and we had James Carson on earlier talking about the big caucuses on Tuesday, February 4th, statewide here in Minnesota. And, he noted that there's 6 Minnesota gubernatorial candidates right now. There's a number of U.S. Senate candidates. But focusing in on the governor's candidates, are you prepared to work with any of them, or have you endorsed any of those candidates? And what's your feeling on the governor's race?
I will not endorse any of the candidates, at this point in time. It just doesn't do my candidacy, any good, because there's, 6 candidates. It's not split, 12.5% or whatever the number would be between each of them. But everybody has their favorite. And for me to come out and say, I really like, at this point in time, could create problems for me.
Right.
I will make this comment. We have 6 really good candidates.
That's right.
I mean, it is amazing, and I think that the 6 candidates are going to make the one candidate just that much better, or the other 5 will make the one candidate just that much better, because there's a lot of knowledge that comes out of there. We have, experiences from all over the spectrum, and I think that's a wonderful thing to have. And they are all very bright, very articulate, and they have a vision. And the vision is not about themselves, and this is what I really love about this, because none of these positions are about that individual. All of these positions, whether it's U.S. Senate, Congress, as you ran for Tony, the state auditor, this is about the people. And the people need to really take a look at that and say, what are they going to do for me? And these 6 candidates are doing a great job of talking about what they can do for the state of Minnesota, how they can help the individual be better than they are today. And I love watching that when I'm at these forums with them. And
so is it pretty much how it works in Minnesota that the governor and the state attorney general and the auditor kind of they get elected together? Or are there instances where, you could win auditor and this person, this Democrat wins the governorship? Like, does it work that way? Or?
It totally could work that way. In fact, you could have it where I could get elected and the Democrats could take all the other seats.
Yep, and you can work with the DFLers, right?
Well, this is the great part, is the state auditor's office, as a constitutional office, is an office upon itself. I'm not beholden to the governor or the state attorney or the secretary of state or the representatives. I am beholden to the taxpayers of Minnesota, the residents of Minnesota. So I am there to work for them to make certain that their tax dollars are being spent the way they're supposed to be spent.
That sounds good. Well, Randy, I'll give you the last 30 seconds here before we bring on our next guest to just talk about about how they can help out your campaign and find more out about you.
Sure, it might go a little bit longer than 30.
That's fine.
I do want to say, I thought Jim did a great job of describing the caucuses, and this is the time for everyone to get involved. February 4th, if you are, sick and tired of having your money being spent a certain way or not understanding how this whole system works, Tuesday, the 4th, is your day to get involved and get out there and tell people what's going on. And if you don't care about anything else, but you care about what you just heard today on the State Auditor, please show up to that caucus, get involved, and say, I'm running because I want to see Randy Gilbert get involved in State Auditor. And that's your first step to be a part of the political process. If you're not one that wants to get a part of that political process, but you are a voter, which means you are a part of the process, you know what, I want you to go to the website, Gilbert for Auditor. We're going to be revamping this, and as time rolls on, we're going to be putting a lot of information out there. Videos will be out there, information will be out there, and they can help a lot of different ways. The easiest way that they can do is right now when they're at home, click to the website, click on my Twitter feed, click on the Facebook face, follow me. Listen to what I have to say, and if you believe in it, push it back out to your social network. Help me grow that social network. If you really like what I want to say, click on the contribute button and give me $50, $20, $100. If you're so inclined, $2,000, which is the max for this year. That money will be used. I'm a fiscal conservative. I throw nickels around like manhole covers, and I will make certain that your dollar is going to go to getting me elected and helping me in ways that you never believed it would. And if you have extra time and you want to get involved in the campaign, please, we could use anybody on the campaign because there is a lot of work, as you well know. There is, lit pieces and conversations and emails and you name it. And if you have an idea that you have, and I'm saying you, the people that are watching us, have an idea that you think, I wish a candidate would do this, you call me up or email me because I want to hear what that new idea is, because we are down ballot as state auditor. People don't know who our current state auditor is. They won't listen to this. But if you have some way that you think you can elevate my campaign, I want to hear from you, and let's do it, because there is nothing off the table right now to get my campaign out there.
Well, Randy Gilbert, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you,
I wish
sir.
you the best in 2014. And for those of you watching, you can go to Randy's website, gilbertforauditor.com. Check it out. If you like what he stands for, a fiscal conservative, help him out. Go on his Twitter feed, go on his Facebook page, and follow him. And most importantly, if you want to become involved, Tuesday, February 4th at 7 o'clock p.m., you can go out there and caucus. Just Google SOS Caucus MN, and it'll show up there. So, Randy, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Tony.
Yep. And we're going to bring on our next guest. His name is Michael Blissenbach, and he's a law student in St. Paul. And we're going to be discussing issues surrounding the Catholic vote here in Minnesota, how to earn the Catholic vote, what Catholics are looking for when they vote, and we're also going to talk about the Sebellius versus Hobby Lobby case, which I'm going to just prop up now with a quick video. So Dallas, if you can pop that on, it'll give us a little bit of background, and then we'll bring Michael on.
It is our desire as the owners of this company to do everything we possibly can in terms of helping strengthen the families of our employees. We've been through a lot of different schools that we give anger management for people. We've Dave Ramsey's classes on how to handle your finances. We've had over 1,000 individuals to take that class to help our employees. So we do a lot of classes. We have 4 full-time chaplains now that work not only in the stores but also here at the corporate office. Of course, closing on Sundays, real important to us. Giving our managers a 5-day work week is very important to us. Closing at 8 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock, so maybe a parent can tuck their kids in bed before they go to bed at night. We do everything we possibly can to be a help to our employees of how that they can structure their life based on biblical principles. It's not something that's forced on anybody, but it's there for them if they would like.
Our goal is just to be a light to the world.
Okay, so that's a little bit of a background there. With that, I'll bring on our guest, Michael Blissenbach, law student. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being on. And I played that clip here because that's how we're going to open up our discussion. There's a huge Supreme Court case that's going to be heard this coming spring or in June, I think it is. It's Sebellius, which is she's the chairwoman of the Human Health and Services. Is that the right department?
Yep, that's correct.
And it's this case versus Hobby Lobby, which I showed you some of the founders of Hobby Lobby, and they're discussing the values of their business. And they are very much strong Christian family that own this company. And he was talking about how the Christian values that he has is basically transcends into his business. They don't operate on Sundays, which is part of the Ten Commandments, keeping the Sabbath day. He said they're very family-oriented. They close at 8 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock. But the main issue that the Supreme Court is going to hear with this is there is a part of the Affordable Care Act, which is the contraception mandate, which essentially is a mandate for all businesses that are over 50 employees to provide the Obamacare insurance. And part of that Obamacare insurance includes contraception and also abortifacients, which this guy is against, with his religious beliefs. So it brings up some very interesting questions.
Yes, it does. And so some of the issues that are raised in Sebellius v. Hobby Lobby are whether or not a for-profit business can exercise free exercise of religion under the First Amendment of the Constitution and also under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, which was passed by overwhelming bipartisan majorities of Congress, which was controlled by the Democratic Party at the time and signed into law by Democratic President Bill Clinton.
Can you explain a little further what that 1993 law said and did?
So the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which in the legal profession we refer to as RFRA, was passed in response to a Supreme Court ruling in 1990 in a case called Employment Division v. Smith. And in Employment Division v. Smith, the Supreme Court, in a majority opinion written by Justice Antonin Scalia, ruled that a generally applicable, so a law that applies to everybody, and facially neutral, so it doesn't single anybody out, does not require a religious exemption under the First Amendment.
Wow.
And so what RFRA tries to do is to pretty much turn back the clock to before Employment Division v. Smith was decided. The Supreme Court struck down RFRA as applied to the states, but it still applies to the federal government.
Mm-hmm. And so going back now to the Hobby Lobby case, can you just explain better to the audience out there that's not that aren't legal scholars or lawyers, what this case is about, what the foundation of the case is and some of the implications of the decision?
So the foundation of the case is the Green family who runs Hobby Lobby, which is a closely held corporation as opposed to a publicly traded corporation. They are being asked, Hobby Lobby is being asked, ordered rather, by the federal government to provide coverage for contraceptive devices. And if I understand correctly, the Green family is evangelical. And so what they object to is paying for forms of contraception that have the potential to cause abortions. And in the evangelical faith, abortion is gravely immoral, and so they object to financing a medical procedure that is gravely immoral in the eyes of their religious faith. And the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, which was the court that immediately heard this case before it was appealed to the Supreme Court, ruled that in light of another case called Citizens United v. FEC, which held that businesses had freedom of speech rights under the Constitution, that also would make sense if businesses have free speech rights for them to have freedom of religion under the Constitution as well.
Wow. Yeah, that Citizens United case caused an uproar. I don't even know if it was a partisan thing, but one of the implications of that decision is that a corporation is essentially viewed as a person. Therefore, since it's a person or viewed that same way, that freedom of speech laws, the freedom of speech clause in the U.S. Constitution applies to corporations. Is that right?
Yeah, that's basically what Citizens United held. And the Supreme Court has never ruled on the question of whether a for-profit corporation can practice religion and would therefore have a right to free exercise under the Constitution or under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. So it'll be interesting to see what the Supreme Court does on that case.
Yeah. Do you think part of the problem with this particular case, the Hobby Lobby case, is that there's a disconnect between the political side of it, the biological side of it, and the religious belief side of it that maybe a lot of people can't see? Because if you talk to your average man or woman on the street here in Minnesota, they will tell you that something like a birth control pill doesn't cause abortions. And you could even talk to many different doctors and people in the medical industry, and they'll tell you point blank that this doesn't cause abortions. And do you think that that's a factor at all in terms of the way that people view this particular case?
Well, when I'm talking with people who are more on the liberal side of the aisle, so to speak, I pretty much frame it in terms of people being forced to pay for something that they find morally objectionable. I mean, asking Hobby Lobby to fund to pay for abortifacient drugs could be seen as equivalent to forcing Quakers who have strong objections to war to help finance a munitions facility. So, I mean, it's not just about contraception. It's about the government forcing people to pay for something that they find morally objectionable. And I think that that's something that people, regardless of their political persuasions, should be concerned about.
True, but I mean, in that example that you just gave, though, for the Quakers or anyone who's anti-war or is against killing, like, we still have to, we still are funding those things through our taxpayer dollars. And so that same liberal may say, well, Michael, I am paying for this, and I don't agree with this, and you're going to have to pay for this, even though you don't agree with that. That's just the way things are.
Well, but what's different here is, I know there's a law called Title X that provides taxpayer funding for birth control. So if the government wanted to expand access to birth control, they could just expand Title X or have separate riders for contraception coverage that people could purchase or sign up for at no cost to them. The government could do that. They don't have to provide access to contraception in a way that burdens religious liberty. They have other options. They just decided not to do so in this case.
So what is your prediction for this Hobby Lobby case? How do you think the Supreme Court is going to decide?
Well, it all depends on what Justice Kennedy decides. The way I see it, there's probably 4 votes against the Greens, and there's probably 4 votes in favor of the Greens. And given Justice Kennedy's libertarian slant, he could go either way. My gut instinct is that it'll be a 5-4 decision in favor of Hobby Lobby and the Greens.
And can you just give a breakdown of the Supreme Court justices? How many of them are Catholic?
There are 6 of them if you count Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who was raised Catholic. I don't know if she practices her faith anymore. And then the other 3 justices are Jewish.
That's interesting, and because the second part of our conversation that I wanted to talk about was, you're Catholic American. You live in St. Paul. I am a Catholic American as well. We're both practicing Catholics, and we had Jim Carson on earlier and Randy Gilbert talking about his candidacy for state auditor. And I believe that there's a lot of politicians out there that are very interested to know how to earn the Catholic vote. And I started thinking about this. There's a lot of assumptions that have been made that, well, if you're Catholic, you're pro-life, and if you're pro-life, therefore you vote for pro-life candidates. And do you think that that's an accurate portrayal of people's voting behaviors here in the Twin Cities?
I think for a lot of Catholics that attend Mass weekly, that's the case. And for some Catholics, though, they see the Republican Party as hostile to the poor and the working class. And so while they may oppose abortion, some of them see issues like that as more important, and that's why I think Mitt Romney lost states like Michigan and Ohio, because he was perceived as being insensitive and out of touch with the concerns of the poor and the working class.
Yeah, and I mean, there is definitely some type of a disconnect going on though between the Catholic teachings and then how Catholics tend to live their lives. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but I've heard that over 80 and maybe even over 90% of Catholic women use hormonal birth control. And so, going back to this issue with the Hobby Lobby, can you talk about how people live their lives versus what their faith teaches, and are these things streamlined or are they vastly different?
Well, I know at the college that I went to, I hung out with a pretty Catholic crowd, and so the Catholics that I knew probably weren't representative of the population of Catholics in the United States. But from the statistical data from the Pew Forum that I've seen, Catholics who attend Mass weekly tend to be more faithful to the teachings of the Catholic Church than people who may self-identify as Catholic and see it as part of their culture, but not really believe what the Catholic Church teaches to be the truth.
And I go to Catholic church at Nativity. Leona and I belong to that parish, and it'd be my estimate that out of the Nativity parishioners, it's probably somewhere around 50-50. 50% of them vote DFL, and the other 50% vote on the Republican side, or it could even be more that actually vote for the DFL. And you had mentioned something interesting that, yes, there's a social aspect of Catholicism and politics, the issue of life and, the issue of traditional marriage. But then there's also issues of government roles in serving the poor, in making sure that other social justice issues are recognized. And I guess, why do you think it is that people believe that Republicans are anti-poor or against the poor? And do you think it's true?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily true, but I think why people might think that is they might hear political commentators talking about welfare babies or anchor babies or tightening immigration laws in a way that might make it difficult for places like Catholic Charities to help people who are coming into the country. And
so you're saying a lot of it has to do with the rhetoric that they're hearing in the mainstream?
Right. I think political rhetoric on both sides has been more polarized and amplified than it necessarily was in the past.
And do you think it would be inconsistent of somebody who identifies themselves as pro-life, but I think there's some that say that they're pro-life, but then they also say that they don't have the right to tell other people to be pro-life, and so therefore they can vote for pro-choice candidates? Can you talk about that a little more?
Well, what the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops says in their document called Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, which you can find on the website of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, is that people cannot vote for a candidate who supports abortion unless there's an equally gravely as proportionate issue that's also in play, that the candidate takes a position that's not in alignment with what the church teaches. So I remember back in 2004 and in 2008, some pro-lifers I know voted for John Kerry or Barack Obama because they saw the Iraq War as proportionate to abortion. Now, whether or not you think that the war was proportionate to the abortion issue depends on who you ask, but I know that was one of the justifications that I heard when I would talk to people.
That's interesting. I mean, and I do see those types of those same types of divisions that you're highlighting on, and so you consider yourself on any side of the aisle, or are you more of an independent?
I'm more of an independent, so I have views that are on both sides of the aisle.
So have you voted both ways then before?
Well, for me, a candidate's pro-life position is a non-negotiable issue, but if both candidates are pro-life, and you do see that and sometimes in races for county commissioner and stuff like that, then other issues come into play. And for some offices like county commissioner, I voted for candidates that are center-left but pro-life.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because we were talking before the show started that in Minnesota, even though the Democrats have the majority in the state house and the state senate, there is also a pro-life majority in both chambers, and I think that's remarkable because the stereotype is that if you're Democrat, you are pro-choice. But you're telling me that that's not necessarily the case.
No, that's not necessarily the case. In fact, as late as 1990, we had a pro-life DFL governor, Rudy Perpich, in office, who's the only Catholic governor that we've ever had, and his opponent in the 1990 election was Arnie Carson, who was a pro-choice Republican.
Yeah.
And so the conventional stands were flipped in that race.
And who won that one?
Arnie Carson won that race, but Rudy Perpich had previously served 3 terms as governor.
And then, and then that's right. And then the next term, that's when we got Governor Ventura. Is that right?
No, Carlson got reelected in 1994, and then in 1998 we got Ventura.
I see. And we're running out of time here, Michael, but the last thing I wanted to talk about was that you were pretty active in the Minnesotans for Marriage campaign.
That's correct.
You believe in traditional marriage, that
Yes, I
marriage
do.
is between one man and one woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know, did you see, and you probably talked to a lot of people about this issue, I'm assuming, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
So did you see that this issue of marriage, did it fall on religious lines or did it fall on partisan lines? And why do you think it is?
Well, I know it didn't fall on partisan lines. I'm not so sure about religious lines because I didn't see a breakdown of that. But I know where the marriage amendment did the worst, other than in St. Paul and Minneapolis, was some suburbs that typically slant Republican, such as Edina, where, if I recall correctly, the amendment, there was a vote of 60% against it. And in my hometown, the precinct that had the highest support for Obama also had the highest support for the marriage amendment. And a precinct that had a high support for Romney had a very high vote against the marriage amendment. So it didn't break down on partisan lines necessarily.
Yeah, that is interesting. The trends that were discovered in that, I mean, I know that there were some precincts in St. Paul and State Senator Sandy Pappas' district where she won like with 90% of the vote. But there were certain precincts that she won overwhelmingly that turned out over 50%, I believe. But, you know, they were few and far between, but they actually voted above 50% for the marriage amendment, which I thought was pretty interesting. But it seemed like it was only slices, tiny slices in St. Paul neighborhoods. And I'm wondering if it was, and I didn't study this further, but I'm wondering if it's because there was a church in that area, a Catholic church.
Well, either that or it could have been a precinct that was primarily Hmong, Somali, or African American, because we saw high support for the marriage amendment among those ethnic groups as well.
That's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Well, new immigrant groups to Minnesota, they tend to be fiscally liberal because they're in favor of social services, but they tend to be very socially conservative. And so they might vote Democratic because they see the Democratic Party as being more friendly to immigrants, but they'll vote for things like the marriage amendment because they also believe in the sanctity of life and the family.
Wow. Well, we're running out of time here, Michael, but I wanted to thank you for coming in and talking about this subject and, you know, how to earn the Catholic vote and your perspective. I certainly appreciate that. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony.
Yeah, and best of luck with your next semester here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in to the Tony Hernandez Show. We broadcast live every Saturday from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock at SCC Television Studios in White Bear Lake. We also replay on SPNN, which is a channel in St. Paul, and our YouTube channel, which is named Tony Hernandez Show. I'd like to thank our guests, Jim Carson, Randy Gilbert, and Michael Blissenbach, and thank you for tuning in. May God bless you, may God bless America, and vaya con Dios.